1 point. Everybody makes mistakes. That was probably one. No? It was a good learning experience. Definitely, what not to do. I went to the University of Manitoba for a while, did some poli-sci there, and then worked for Conservative MP Rod Bernuge in his constituency office, where I met Stephanie.
Yep.
That worked out very well. Also was involved in the Manitoba PC party at the legislature when they were in the opposition. And then I've worked at 2 student newspapers, University of Manitoba and University of Winnipeg. So I'd say that's, a bit of experience in politics and in the media. And now I'm going to get to my next topic, which is the second threat to Canada, which is identity politics. How's the sound for people in the back there? Is that a little bit better? No? So as we can see, the level of anger and division in Canada is rising. The memory of Canada's founders, including Sir John A. Macdonald, is being systematically erased as statues are torn out, desecrated, and uprooted across the country. Love of country is being replaced by identification with narrow victim groups based upon race and gender, oppressed versus oppressor, and victim versus victimizer. More and more people tell me that it no longer feels like Canada is the country it was. The country that Canada we love is being lost, and they no longer know what it means to be Canadian. There's a profound sense of loss as we can feel something great and special slowly slipping away. This disturbing and dangerous trend is being driven primarily by the spread of identity politics, which is spreading throughout our country like a virus and weakening the bonds of citizenship and national identity that hold our nation together. While globalism is the ideology pushed on us to weaken our country from the top down, identity politics is being used to weaken Canada from the bottom up. It starts at universities as radical professors, many of whom openly admit that they are Marxists, tell their students that individuals are irrelevant and that the power struggle between the oppressed and the oppressor is the only possible frame through which they can view the world. We're already seeing the disastrous consequences of that teaching. In just the past month, we've already seen at least 2 violent attacks on pro-life Canadians, where peaceful pro-life protesters were assaulted by radical leftists, including a far leftist man who kicked a pro-life woman and is now facing 8 charges. Of course, Mr. Feminist Justin Trudeau, who was so quick to respond to the fake hijab hoax, has been silent on attacks against pro-life women in Canada. Now we're seeing the left become increasingly violent and intolerant, banning speakers they don't like from university campuses, saying speech they disagree with is violence, while actually committing violence against anyone who dares to disagree with them. And this is a direct consequence of identity politics. Is it really any surprise that after years and years of hearing rhetoric which casts Christian Canadians and pro-life Canadians as part of the oppressor group, a bunch of students then think that serves as justification in their minds to defeat the oppressors by any means necessary, including the use of force? As you can imagine, it's not possible to maintain the rule of law or to maintain a free society when one side of the political debate decides that violence is acceptable. And that same dangerous attitude is being fed from the top down as well. You'll notice that Justin Trudeau never actually criticizes those who commit horrific acts. For example, in the case of Terry Lynn McClintock, who participated in the abduction, rape, and murder of 8-year-old Tori Stafford, and was then transferred to a minimum security healing lodge without fences where children are present after she lied about being Indigenous. Justin Trudeau refused to condemn McClintock's horrendous crimes and instead attacked the Conservatives, accusing them of being ambulance-chasing politicians for even bringing it up. Trudeau called Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives Islamophobes for opposing his plan to reintegrate ISIS fighters with poetry and pottery classes. He called the Conservatives fearmongers and then said that fear is the biggest threat in the world, not ISIS, not nuclear war, not economic collapse, but fear. So we can obviously see where he's going with that. He says conservatives are fearmongers and then fear is the biggest threat. That's his way of obviously saying conservatives are the biggest threat in the world. That's the same kind of fear-mongering and demonization and delegitimizing of Canadians who disagree with him that we see on university campuses being pushed by the radical left. So obviously what happens at universities isn't staying there. And that's, when I was at university, years ago, they had a lot of things. One example was a racialized student representative that they were trying to pass. And that means there'd be one student who'd represent all students who were racialized, which means non-white. So everyone who's non-white somehow the same in the ideas, in the ideology of identity politics, and they'd have a representative. I fought against that idea, it got stopped, but now you see it all over the place, and that term is acceptable everywhere. So things that happen in university don't stay there, and that's why there needs to be a fight there as well, because it does spread throughout the entire society. Now, identity politics is seeking to create a dangerous void in our country by wiping out our historical and cultural past. Canada was built primarily upon the ideas of Western civilization, and Western civilization was in turn built heavily upon Christianity, particularly the idea that every one of us is made in the image of God and thus has an inherent worth and dignity that is worthy of respect. Now, the link between Christianity and human dignity is not often discussed these days, but it is certainly true, as noted by Michael Novak of the Acton Institute. Writes Novak, "What, after all, is human dignity? The English word dignity is rooted in the Latin word dignus, which means worthy of esteem and honor, due a certain respect, and of weighty importance. In ordinary discourse, we use dignity only in reference to human persons, but of course in the Bible, it is also used of other special persons or spiritual substances, that is, beings capable of insight and choice such as God, angels, and demons. Both Aristotle and Plato held that most humans are by nature slavish and suitable only to be slaves. Most do not have natures worthy of freedom and proper to be free men. The Greeks did not use the term dignity for all human beings, only for the few. By contrast, Christianity insisted that every single human is loved by the Creator, made in His image, and destined for eternal friendship and communion. Following Judaism, Christianity made human dignity a concept of universal application. Inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of these, the least of my brethren, ye have done it unto me. Christianity made it a matter of self-condemnation to use another human being as a means to an end. Each human being is to be shown dignity due to God, because God loves each of us as a friend, and each has God as a father." That idea, the inherent dignity and worth of the individual, served as the seed that grew into the freedom that sets apart the Western world from every other civilization. And we can see the direct impact of that idea of human dignity in many ways, including how historically Western Christian nations extend rights to people of all faiths and political viewpoints, a very stark contrast to much of the Islamic world, where non-Muslims often have very few, or in some cases no rights at all, or communist nations, where those who disagree with the political ideology of the state are executed, disappeared, or re-educated for daring to question the status quo or think freely. And one very creepy thing that's happening is if you look at the way, say a celebrity says something wrong or offensive, they go and apologize and they say, "Oh, please forgive me, I'm so wrong, I'm going to go educate myself." It's actually very similar to the language they used to the way the Stalinist show trials were conducted. Obviously, they're not being killed, but there is the whole kind of apology and debasing yourself and, "Oh, I'm sorry I offended," political correctness. So that's very concerning. And Jordan Peterson's talked a lot about that, some of those similarities. Now, that's why, the fact that our societies are free, that's why, with almost no exceptions, Western countries with a history of Christianity are the countries that everyone is trying to get into. They say that people vote with their feet, and we only have to look at the immigration numbers to see how people desperately try to flee non-Western countries to get to Western countries. And this speaks to the simple truth that Western civilization is superior. It is the best, and we should never be afraid to say so. We must have the courage to speak the truth. Western civilization offers individuals the most opportunity to be themselves, to speak their minds, to worship freely, and to achieve prosperity. It's not a coincidence, and it's not an accident. It's because Western civilization is based upon recognizing and protecting the dignity of the individual rather than the state. The dignity of the individual is something Canadians have fought and died for, including in World War II when we fought against the Nazis who placed racial identity and state power above all else, and against the Islamists in Afghanistan who placed ruthless and fascistic Sharia law above all else. If we believe in human dignity, we believe that people of many different backgrounds can share the same values and should be judged by their actions. Now, it's amazing that we even have to say this, but identity politics has twisted things around so much that the basic yet profound idea of Martin Luther King Jr., that people shouldn't be judged by their skin color, is now being argued against by the far left. And we believe that people from different backgrounds have the capacity to share certain values. I believe that men and women should have equal rights under the law. A belief that people should be able to criticize the government and speak freely. A belief that we should have the power to vote out a government we don't support. And a belief that people should be able to worship freely. All aspects of respecting the dignity of the individual. But not everyone in the world believes that. Free Western societies are not the norm. And while there are many people from around the world who embrace freedom, love freedom, and want to defend and strengthen the ideas at the core of Western civilization, there are also many who are not. That's why any free country that wants to stay that way must have a strong national identity, strong national confidence, and a willingness to make clear what our values are, and just as importantly, are not. And this is where identity politics has proven so destructive. Everything I just spoke about, our belief in the dignity of the individual rights, the role played by Christianity in Western civilization, and the very idea of Western civilization, shared values among people of different backgrounds, all of those things are explicitly rejected by those who spread identity politics. Those who push identity politics think Western civilization is nothing but colonization and oppression. They think Christianity is a tool of control and subjugation. They think people are nothing more than the color of their skin and where that places them on a victimizer hierarchy, rejecting the idea that people from different backgrounds can reach the same conclusion about the importance of freedom and human worth. The identity politics pushers see Canada's history as evil, and they want to wipe out that history, as we can see in their effort to recast the founding of our nation as nothing but colonization, and in their effort to erase the memory of Canada's founding father. Now take a moment and imagine a house, sturdy and strong, and then imagine that you see people digging at the base of the house, digging out the foundation. And then you watch as they rip the foundation out from under the house. Yeah. What do you think would happen? The house would collapse. Canada's foundation is Western civilization and the dignity of the individual. And the people pushing identity politics want to tear that foundation out. And even as we speak, they're digging like mad. And our foundation is weakening. It's why our sense of national pride and national identity is evaporating. It's why we see politicians like Justin Trudeau who demonize nationalism, reject patriotism, and openly declare that Canada has no core identity. He says diversity is strength, while ignoring the fact that true strength in a nation comes from unity around shared values. The problem with Trudeau's combo of diversity is strength and his claim that Canada has no core identity is that it will inevitably lead to a country that is nothing more than a place on a map. Already we can see Canada becoming increasingly divided up into smaller and smaller groups, where some people bring the old fights of their homeland and continue those fights in our own country. This is leading to more and more insanity, like watching a statue of John A. Macdonald get torn down at the same time a park in Winnipeg was named after Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan. Identity politics has led us to the point where we can't even honor our own founding father, but we can somehow honor the founding father of a nation that totally rejects the freedoms we have in Canada. It's a disgrace and it's disturbing. And as I said, the void that is being created by identity politics is growing. And the thing about a void is that inevitably it will get filled with something. And that will lead us to the final threat to Canada, Islamism.
So we'll have the same